Page 66, Habanera from Carmen. Carmen is an opera by Bizet. This isn't cut time, but for the purposes of learning it, we're going to convert it to 4/4. Just count 4. Right hand comes in on beat 3. 3, 4, 1. And there's an accent. And these staccatos and accents really bring out this piece. So. Triplets, 1 and a 2. This is a 1 and a 2 and. This is where we're going back and forth between triple and duple. 1 and a 2. Now if you can, well the pedal will help you, but try and do it with the fingers. Second measure, second line here. It's slurred to the D. Try and reach up if your hand's big enough and connect those. The D staccato, you can push up. Again, the third line, second measure, connect the D's. Yep. It kind of keeps doing this over and over and over and over. And then on top of page 67, you get here. Same rhythm, different notes. Now in the second measure, try and bring out the F sharp, the melody's the top note. Watch the fingering in the third measure. Thumb. And then 2/4, wrist staccato. If you can, bring out the top note. I'm just putting more weight on the top note is all. And the other notes just going along for the ride. For the most part, that's the piece. It just keeps going this over and over and over. In the third line, third measure, you get a fermata. Going to hold that one extra count when we do the play with me, and then now watch this, 4 and a 4 and the staccato. The last measure, those last notes, they're all accented, and it's kind of loud. They mean business here, Last line, third measure. Watch the fingering, 4, 3. And then I'm going to hold that one extra count, and then we go on. Lift up before you do the triplets. Don't connect it. No. Like so. Left hand has a similar rhythm. It just reinforces the rhythm for the most part. 1. And see the slurs there? So you don't need to connect the D and the A together. Lift up. But make sure the staccatos are short. Pedal's going to connect it anyway, but the feel is there. 1, ba-da, ba-da. I suppose if you wanted to connect them, you could. That's pretty much what the left hand is doing throughout most of this. I mean, it changes a little bit there toward the end. You get different notes, but really that's pretty much it. And we already the articulation I sort of showed you on that one is a lot of accents and staccatos and the slurs occasionally, and when the slurs occur they are important, so make sure they are slurred. So that leaves what, the dynamics? Well, you're starting out sort of medium loud, and that's the melody, that's the right hand, so keep the left hand under it. You get these little crescendos and decrescendos throughout. Yeah. It's more important in this piece, I think, to really feel these than to force them. So learn the piece pretty well first before you start messing around with the decrescendos and crescendos. Because on the second line there on page 66, we're at the first measure there, when it's coming in, you want to come down. But then the half note gets an accent. So it's... And then at the third measure, same thing. Now you're come back up. It's a subtle thing, and it's up to you. But if you'll notice the second and third lines on page 66 in the second measure, the third line has a crescendo, the second line doesn't. Maybe that's an error, but I get the feeling that's intentional. So that means in the second line, you're not going to crescendo, you stay there. But in the third line, you can actually play that D a little softer so you got room to grow. Because in the second line, you're playing this. Third line, you're playing this. So take the dissonance out and it kind of resolves it a little bit, but then you're taking off again. So in the third line, and then you take off again. Well, second line, you didn't do that. And then you get this dissonance again, but now they want you to crescendo again. But this crescendo goes further. So they're not exactly the same, and this is important in music. When we have the same musical motif over and over and over and over, we try and figure out ways to alter it or to interpret it differently so it's a little bit different. It's not just the same thing all the time. So in the second line you have that coming down and then an accent. You're not crescendoing there, you're already loud. But in the third line down, you can come down and a little softer and then get a little louder. But by the second beat, you're loud. But in the last line, now you're coming down again with the dissonance, but now you're going to grow for the rest of the measure. So they're just really small changes, but they're so important in music. And this is what we try and study when we're trying to figure out how to interpret a piece. We're looking for these little things. A lot of times the editor doesn't give you this. You got to figure it out and interpret it. How can I play this and interpret this a little differently without violating what the music is telling me to do? You were getting into more advanced type stuff when we do that, but I wanted to point out, why are these dynamic differences? Either that or it's just an error, and I don't think it's an error. Top of page 67 here. So we lost the eighth note in the left hand, and that's okay. That's really about it as far as the dynamics go. You know, you're loud at the top of page 67. You got some more crescendos. Look at the last two measures. The first line. Go over to here. That's where we're headed. Same thing in the second line, third measure, go there. Ba 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 ba. Now it's fortissimo. Now third line down, third measure. Now crescendo up to it. And then the last line, the third measure, you're going to crescendo up to that fermata note. That's where you're headed. All these notes are preparing that note. And then fortissimo at the end. And staccato. It's a neat piece when you can really get into it and give it that emotional context and the accents and all this stuff. It's amazing. Let's try it really, really slow, and we'll leave out most of that junk. We're just going to play notes and rhythm. 4/4 time, because this is in 2. It's 1, 2. It's moderato 2. 1, 2, 1. That's how it goes, but we're going to go slow. And we're going to take it in 4. Now on top of all that, now they've added pedal, and I recommend you figure all that out first. Now we add pedal. As a lot of this is pedal the same. It's like at the very beginning, the first measure. I'm going to push the pedal down right after the note, and I'm going to lift it as I play that staccato note. I need a staccato, so I have to lift it as I play it, not after I play it, as I play it. that's the pedal for pretty much the whole thing. When you get over to page 67, third line down, third measure on those. I know the pedal's covering up the staccato, but keep the technique. Lift the pedal after you play the fermata note. Lift it up. We don't need all of this when we play this. If I keep it down through all that, it's too it's like, huh? So lift it up right after you play the fermata note and then keep it up. Because we want a little silence before we play the triplets. You have a staccato in the left hand. Last line, third measure, similar. It's here. After I play the fermata note, I'll lift the pedal up. And I'll leave it up then for the rest of the piece, because I want some silence going on. I'll show you one little pedal technique they don't show you, and they won't show you. Probably never show you, but I'll show you anyway. The last note, the very piece, at the bottom of page 67, this fortissimo, you can push the pedal down right when you play that and lift the pedal up with it. Just the pedal goes down and up with it. Just the last note, not the eighth note, just the quarter note. All it does is it releases a lot of overtones, and it helps to make that fortissimo come out more. Just remember that the last note is staccato, so the pedal's going to have to be staccato. It's just down and up. So let's try this out slowly. I'll give us 4 counts. Left hand's here, right hand's here, foot's on the pedal. 1, 2, ready, go. 1 and 2. 1 and 2. 1 and 2. 2. Hold.